Mexican. So we drove to New York, and in New York, I remember going to the ATM to get some money. And in New York, they have these ATMs where you have to go in the little glass room to get your money at ATM. I don't know if they have that here or if any of you have been to New York. Now, alhamdulillah, you have to put your bank card in to go in there. But in '97, it was not like this. You went in, and it was almost like the game Mousetrap, because you go in, take out your money, criminal comes right in behind you. There's nowhere for you to go. You know, there's nowhere to run. So I went in, I took my money out of the ATM, and I heard the door open behind me. You know, so I turned around. You know, I thought somebody was coming in behind me, and there was a man who put a gun to my face. And he must have really, 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 really needed this money, because he didn't ask me anything. He didn't say a single word. I just remember looking at the gun in my face and him pulling the trigger. And it was a revolver. And to this day, I'll never forget that image in my head of seeing that little spindle turn and hearing that very distinct click of a revolver. And it probably could have been like a .32 snub-nosed gun like this, but when it was in my face, it looked like one of those like cannons that you see on the movies. And I remember when he pulled the trigger, I didn't think anything. You don't think anything. It just blank. You just go into this like shock of blankness. And then a couple seconds later, thankfully I had been doing martial arts. That might have helped me overcome the fight or flight syndrome, because all I could think was, go! You know, like myself kicking myself, like, what are you doing? Go! So I bum rushed him. We went flying. He went flying. Money went flying. Gun went flying. And I took off and went to the hotel and didn't say anything to anybody. We went back to South Carolina the next day. And I didn't say anything because we weren't supposed to be in New York. My grandfather would have killed me. If that guy didn't kill me, my grandfather would have took care of it. So I didn't say anything until about a month or two later. You know, I kept having nightmares about this same incident. I kept having night terrors from this incident. And so I told my grandmother about it. And she told me the same thing that the officer had told me. She said, you know, you have to realize that God has a purpose for your life. You're here for a reason. People don't go through the things that you've been through and still walking on this earth without a reason, and you're pushing the limit. This is what she told me. You're pushing the limit, really. God has something for you, and He wants you to get it, but you're pushing it. And she didn't tell me to go back to Christianity and study my Bible. The only thing she told me was that God hasn't gone anywhere. You just have not looked in the right place yet. And so I decided to put myself back together. You know, the car wreck, the gun thing, the getting arrested for fighting, like all of that, like really made me stop really quick and think, you know, that I need to get my stuff together. So I became an agnostic. Someone who I believed in God with no form of religion. I prayed to God on the floor on my hands and knees, because this is how all the books of God, this is how the Bible, the Torah, the New Testament, the Bhagavad Gita, all of these scriptures that I ever read, they said that this is how the men of God prayed. And it was during this time that I did read one book about Islam in the public library, because I had never heard of Islam ever. But I remember I was looking in the religious section in the library at school, and there was a book about Islam, and or it was in the library, the public library, and I remember it was some title like "Why I'm Not a Muslim" or some, you know, one of these titles that was propagandistic against Islam, but I had no idea. So I just took the book and I read it, and I remember it said that Muslims, M-O-S-L-E-M-S, and any of you knowing Arabic knows that's a very derogatory word. A Muslim is someone who oppresses someone else. That's a very quick sleight of the pen that was used in the past for a very real purpose. It said that Muslims were people who worshipped a moon god named Allah, who lived in a box in the desert in Saudi Arabia, and they were oppressive to women. I remember there was a whole chapter about how they could have 4 wives and as many as they want, actually, because they could marry 2, divorce 1, get 3 more, you know, this whole, you know, and it said that, you know, I remember the one thing that really caught my attention was the whole chapter on jihad, where it said that Muslims were allowed to kill non-Muslims at any time, at any place, without discretion, and it was an honorable act, and not only would they go to heaven before it, but they would get 70 virgins on the way. You know, so I closed the book on Islam, put it back on the shelf, and marked off Islam off my little list of religions and said thanks but no thanks, and if I ever see a Muslim, I am out. And I said I'm pretty safe in Greenville, South Carolina. I had never seen a Muslim ever. So I said, I don't have to worry about running into no Muslims, thank God. So, I started, just worshiping. I tried to just be a good person, pray to God, ask Him for guidance, try to be a genuinely good person. And I remember what changed is when I met a Muslim. I met a Muslim who I had met a couple of times at school. We had went to school together, and I knew him, but I never knew that he was Muslim. And there's a couple of reasons why I never known he was Muslim. Because he was an African American, number one, and the book said that Muslims were Arabs. And number two, I didn't know, I thought Muslims ran around, marrying as many women as they want and killing non-Muslims. I didn't know that they could also be part-time drug dealers. So I didn't know, I never knew that this guy was Muslim. I didn't put two and two together. So we were at his house one day, and me and my other friend, the one that I got into a lot of trouble with, I'm trying to keep him out of trouble now. We were at his house, and we were debating something about religion. I forget what even the topic was, but you had two teenagers thinking they know everything. And I was trying to explain something to him about the Bible. And that guy came in and was listening. He said, "Have you ever heard of Islam?" I said, "Yes, I've heard all about Islam." He was like, "Okay, so what do you think of it?" I said, "What do you mean what I think of it? That's probably the worst religion I've ever seen on the face of the planet." He's like, "Why?" And he's like, "I'm a Muslim." I was like, "Man, stop playing." Like, you're an African American. He's like, "So?" I'm like, "The book said you guys were Arab. All the Muslims were Arabs." He was like, "What else did you read in the book?" And I told him. He was like, "Man, what in the, what have you been reading?" He's like, "You need to go to the mosque for Jummah." He's like, he told me, he said, "I'm not a good Muslim." This is what he said to me. He said, "I'm not a good Muslim. I'm not even going to try to front and say I'm a good Muslim." He said, "But I can guide you to some people that can tell you the real truth about Islam," because he knew about my story about wanting to find religion. And he said, "You need to go to the mosque for Jummah." And I said, What's Jummah?" He said, "It's just like church with no chairs." And I said, "I can do church with no chairs because in church the chairs were the worst part anyway." Because they had these hard benches that you sit on that are like this and are so hard. I said, "That's good. You sit on carpet? Wow, man, every church should be like that." And I said, "Where's the mosque?" He said, "It's on Wadehampton Boulevard." I said, "Where on Wadehampton Boulevard?" I lived on Wadehampton Boulevard. I lived right off of Wadehampton Boulevard. He said, "You know where Lee Road intersects with Wadehampton?" I said, Yeah, I live on the other side of that intersection." He said, "It's right there." I said, "No, it's not. There's nothing. There's a gas station or a church." He said, "Yeah, you know that church, the Evangelical Missionary Training Facility?" I said, "Yeah, I used to take missionary classes there." He said, "You know that building in the parking lot with the gold thing on top?" I said, the gym?" He was like, "No, that's the mosque." Because I had always thought it was the gym because it was in the same parking lot and it was just rectangular with two glass doors in the front. And you could literally walk in between the church and the masjid and touch them like this. Anyone doesn't believe me, go to Greenville, South Carolina, look at the masjid. You can almost touch both of them just like this. He said, "Yeah, it's right there." I said, "I've never," at first I was shocked, like I've been living across the street from all these crazy Muslims all my life. I said, "I never knew." And he told me to go to Jummah, and I asked him what time. He said he would meet me there at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday. So I said, okay. I went on Friday, and I'm waiting outside for him. I'm not going inside. That's not happening. And I'm seeing all these people going in, and at this time, it was a predominantly Indo-Paki Arab masjid. Anyone who went in was not American, period. And I did not see even one African American going there. And I did see one. And then when he went in, I heard him talking in a dialect that I realized he was probably from Africa. So I said, he's not American. So I'm not going. I'm waiting, and I'm standing outside, sitting on the church steps, and the imam pulls up and parks right in front of me, who I had no idea he was the imam. But he got out and he asked me, am I waiting for someone, this, that, and the other? And I explained to him. He said, "Oh yeah, we know this brother. You don't see him that much, but we know who he is." He said, "I'm glad you came." He was a very, very nice, gentle young man. And he invited me into the mosque, and I kind of wanted to wait on my friend, but I didn't want, at the same time, I didn't want to tell this man I don't want to go in. So I went in, and they put me in the back and gave me a chair anyway. And I said, I came to sit on the floor. And they gave me a chair anyway, you know, and all of these people are piled up in front of me. And there's no Americans here. And I'm starting to wonder, you know, if this is a setup. Because it's starting to smell like a setup to me. Because in my mind, I'm like, you've been set up before. And this seems kind of like this. So, and I'm starting to think in my head, you know, scenarios. You know, a young mind at play. You know, I said, this other guy, my friend, he probably was in the same situation like me. And he probably made a deal with them to get out, as long as he brought other Americans and tricked them into coming to the mosque so they could do their jihad after Jummah and get their 70 virgins. So I'm sitting here, and there's all these people in front of me, and then there's a curtain with all these people behind me making noise, and I have no idea who's back here. So I'm stuck in the middle of this. I hear that it's some women, but I don't, you know, there's a curtain. I have no idea. So I'm like, there's something very odd about what's going on right here. I'm like, just let me make it. I'm starting to look for the exit. I'm like, you know, calculating how many people are between me and the exit. You know, I know some martial arts, so I said I might hit a couple of them and I'm out. And then the imam came, and I just now realized that he was the imam because he got up on the minbar, you know, and they started to call the adhan. And, you know, I said, okay, that man seemed nice. He seemed genuinely nice, so I felt a little more comfort. And then he got up after the adhan, and he started his khutbah. Inna alhamdulillah nahmaruhu wa I said, oh my God. I said, I bet you he's talking about me. You know, and he's being forceful. You know, he was getting loud and banging on the minbar, and he's pointing in my direction. You know, I'm like, oh man, I gotta get out of here really quick, you know. I said, well, I'm gonna take my chances with the women behind me. I'm going through the curtain. And then he started to, when he got done with his Arabic tirade, he started to explain it. You know, that verily all praise belongs to Allah alone, or God alone, and Him do we worship, and Him do we seek help and assistance. We seek refuge with Him from the evil of life. You know, he explained what he said in Arabic, and it sounded to me so beautiful. It was very, very beautifully prosed, what he said, and I wanted to know where he got that. You know, I said, where did he get that? You know, because it was only about God and about the nature of ourselves. All of us should know that beginning of the khutbah, and he quoted the 3 verses from the Quran. O you who believe, fear God as He should be feared and do not die. And instead of a state of submission to Islam, he was a very wise man, because he translated everything. It was almost as if he knew I was there and translated everything for me. You know, I remember to this day what the khutbah was about. And I don't know if he did it because I was there, or if that was his already planned khutbah, but it's almost as if it was meant for me. The khutbah was that, the title of it was that the forgiveness of Allah is open to anyone at any time, at any place, no matter what, unless they have committed shirk. And the prose of the khutbah was a very long hadith. A very long hadith that some of you will know. And just to make it short, it was the hadith where the Rasulullah met Angel Gabriel or Angel Jibreel, and Angel Jibreel was telling them to tell him that if the Muslims commit this certain sin, to tell them that Allah would forgive them. And every time he would tell the Muslims, they would say, okay, well then what about this sin? And he would go back and meet with Angel Jibreel, and he would go back and come back and say, tell them that Allah will forgive him for that. And this discourse happened, you know, for many different sins. And then finally Angel Jibreel alayhi salam said, tell them that Allah has said, no matter what they do, even if their sins are compiled, you know, like the oceans are from the east to the west, as long as they have not associated a partner with Allah, tell them that Allah will forgive them. And I remember he told me that, or he said that, you know, that the door of repentance to God is open as long as you have not seen the angel of death or the sun hasn't risen from the west. I didn't really understand the sun risen from the west thing at that time. But, and he said that, you know, God's forgiveness has to come from God alone. This was the whole premise of his khutbah, was on forgiveness and tawbah. And I was saying to myself, these are all of the same concepts that I had formulated through reading the religious scriptures myself. And I'm asking myself, where did he get this stuff from? You know, where did he get all this? And he started using names like, he used the name Ibrahim alayhi salam, he used the name Musa, and I'm like, he translated it to Abraham and Moses. I'm like, where did he, you know, where is he getting these? These are names from the Bible. I know these people. And so after the khutbah, they started lining up for the prayer. And I got apprehensive because everybody's getting up in front of me and blocking my exit from the door. And so I guess one guy in the back saw me, and because I had to move back a little bit, he said, "We're about to pray." And I said, "Pray to who?" And he said, "To God." I said, "Which one?" And he said, the one that created the heavens and earth. You know, the same one that's in the Bible, you know, the only creator of the heavens and earth, the only God. I said, "Yes, I know him." So the Imam started to pray, and when he recited the Quran, I know it sounded very intriguing. I had no idea what it was. But then when I saw Muslims bow and prostrate on the floor, verses and verses of every religious book that I had ever read started ringing off in my head, that this was the way men of God prayed. And the first thing that I could think of in my mind was, this is worship. That's what I said to myself. This is not prayer, because prayers are asking God for something. These people are worshiping God. So I said to myself that you've written this religion off way too easily. I thought I was a much more open-minded person than that, and I was ashamed of myself that I had written it off with just one little book. You know, I had put all this studies into the other religions. I read this one thing about Islam and was done. So I went to the Imam after Jummah. You know, he talked to me, and I would have to say that I was probably a little bit rude with him. And I asked him to forgive me. You know, I saw him a few years later. I said, "You got to forgive me for the first time you saw me," because he started telling me, you know, would you like to know a little bit more about? He had a very heavy accent. He was an Egyptian brother. Would you like to know a little bit more about Islam? He tried to give me some pamphlets. I said, no. I don't want any of this right here. I said, "Do you have a book?" This is what I wanted to know. Do you have a book? Can you give me? He said, "Yes, we have a book." I said, "It's called the Quran." I said, "Can I read it? Is it in English? Can I read it?" He said, "Sure, you can read it." And then he tried to explain it to me a little bit, how it came by. I said, "Nah, just give me the book, because the book should speak for itself." So I took the Quran home, and on Friday night I started to read it, because this is a book I had never seen before, and I was very interested. So I went home and I opened the Quran, and I read the Fatiha. It seemed to me kind of like the Lord's Prayer. You know, it was a little similar to what I found in the Bible. But then I started to read Surah Al-Baqarah. I started to read Surah Al-Imran, and I started to see names that I had seen before. I started to see names like Abraham, Moses, David, Jesus, Yahya, John the Baptist, Zechariah, Mary. And I said, I know all of these names, but there was something different about these people in this book. The prophets that I found in the Bible were people that were deplorable, of not very good character. These same men in the Quran were someone who were at the highest echelon of moral character and moral fiber. They were someone that was an example to be followed, because they lived the message that they preached. Therefore, they were able to be followed and emulated. So I read all of these chapters, and I read the story of Jesus, peace be upon him, because when I saw the name Jesus first, that really intrigued me. I wanted to see, what does this book have to say about Jesus? And I read the story in Ali Imran, and I read the story in Surah Al-Maryam, and it was more beautiful than anything I had ever read in the New Testament, or any nativity story that I had ever heard. It was more beautiful than that times 10. I remember the only thing that I could capture my mind was the miracle of how, because in the Bible you never really figure out the conflict of how Mary gets over this finger pointing at her about her coming with a baby and she's not married. There's no real end to that. There's no real defense for her from this in the New Testament. But the Quran is so explicit and so clear that Jesus' first miracle was to speak from the womb, to speak as a baby and defend the honor of his mother. Something that you cannot deny. Something that you cannot deny about her, who Mary was, when you have this baby speaking on her behalf. So I would say I read the Quran entirely in 3 days. But that first night, after I had made it through Surah Al-Imran, my heart was already given to this book. I didn't know what it meant to be a Muslim. I didn't know how to be a Muslim. I didn't even know what that meant. But I knew that whoever it was that followed this book, I wanted to be like these people. I wanted to be like the people that I read about in this book. These were people I could follow. These were prophets. This was a book of guidance. And this was something that the book is calling and appealing to me. That if you don't believe in this book, you never see that. I've never seen this in any other scripture. The direct challenges that are in the Quran, that if you don't believe this book is true, put it to the test. Put it to the test. And this was something that was so astounding to me, that God is telling you over and over again, if you don't believe this is the truth, test it. Bring me something else like it. Test it. Put it to test. If it was written, if there was more than, all of the analogies about God, everything was so logical, so rational, so reasonable in my mind that it was like 2 + 2 = 4, and that was it. There was no 1 + 1 + 1 = 3, egg, yolk, water, fire. There was none of that foolishness. The Quran was very direct and very straightforward in its teachings. So I gave my heart to Islam that night in my living room reading the Quran. And I cried and cried, that I had been looking for the truth all this time, had searched all this way, and it was right across the street from my house. And so I went back on Monday to accept Islam and ask these Muslims where in the world they've been all this time. And I go, ready to go in there and do my thing, and I go and the masjid is locked. And because they only came on Fridays in for Isha during that time, and I didn't know. So I said, okay, I guess I have to come back on Friday. Because every time I passed by the masjid after that, it was always locked. So I came back on Friday and I took my shahada, and as they say, the rest is history. But I don't travel around the world, and this was in December of 1998. I don't travel around the country and the world telling my story, just for the entertainment value. Even though I've been told it does have some entertainment value, I don't tell it for that person for sure. If that was the only reason, then you could just get it off of YouTube and it was the same exact story. I'm going to finish with this, and I hope you can give me 10 more minutes, inshallah, to tell you why I go around telling my story. I tell my story to let everyone realize that there are millions and millions of people just like me. Just like me in 1998, searching for the truth, can't find a way out. There are millions of people. There are probably millions of people in California, hundreds and thousands, if not millions, right here in in Orange County and Los Angeles in the Southern California area, that want to know the truth, that are tired of hearing the same garbage preached to them over and over again, tired of this shaitan box telling them the same thing over and over again, tired of the world being in the condition that it's in, tired of their life being in the condition it's in. And we as Muslims have the solution to every single one of their problems. And guess where we keep it at? Right here inside the masjid. Right here inside the masjid, we have all of this truth. We have the solution to every problem in the world. You want to solve the world hunger? The problem of world hunger? Islam has the problem. You want to solve the problem of world poverty? Islam has the answer. You want to fix the economic situation of this country? Islam could fix it tomorrow. And this was in an op-ed piece in the Washington Post. In the Washington Post, there was an op-ed piece that the two markets that are falling apart in this country are investments and housing. And there are two people in this market that while the rest are bottoming it out, this market is steadily climbing. It's not getting rich overnight like people want to, but it is continually going up, and that is Islamic financing and Islamic housing markets. These two things are so steady and so strong that economists in D.C. are trying to figure out how they can take some of these Islamic principles, from these investing and housing firms, and plug them into this system to give it some stability, because they realize that you won't get rich overnight in the Islamic system, but it will be stable. It will be something that will give stability. So they are starting to find out that Islam has the answer and the solution to their problems. But we already know this. We already know this, that we can solve every world problem with Islam, would put an end to it. But the problem is, we're hiding it from the people. Unfortunately, willingly or unwillingly, knowingly, unknowingly, we are hiding this from the people. And there's a statement in the Quran and that Allah warns the Jews about what they did with their religion. And it is a statement that is left in the Quran for us, that verily those who conceal the evidences and the clear proofs, after we have made it clear for them in the book, they are those who are cursed by Allah and cursed by those who curse. unless they repent and reveal that which they have been concealing. Those I will accept their repentance, because I am the one who accepts it, the most merciful. We have become guilty just the same way the Jews have of hiding the truth about their religion. When they saw the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they knew the truth and wanted to hide it. People, we know the truth about Islam, and we are hiding it. We as Muslims are running around begging Allah for dignity and honor and help when He has already given it to us in this deen. Everything that a Muslim could ever want has already been given to him in this deen of Islam. Anything that you ask Allah for, there is an account set up for you to go take it out of. You just got to find it where it's at. And any of you, I'm not going to go through the ayahs for they're too long, but if you want to know the solutions to every one of your problems in this world and the hereafter, just go read Surah Al-Saf, ayah 10 through 13. Very, very easy solution. If I had the time, I would read them to you, inshallah. But we have the cure to every disease in the world. And we're not giving it to the people. And I want to use this as a parable because I really want this to hit home with you. Let's say, what is your name, brother? Abdullah, mashallah. Let's say me and Abdullah are best friends. We're brothers in deen. We're roommates. And we've been roommates for years and years and years. And let's say brother Abdullah has contracts an illness, a disease that is one of the most painful diseases that any human being can ever go through in his life. And it's not something that is going to kill him quick. Let's say this disease is going to suffer and fester with Abdullah and make him not be able to eat, sleep, nothing. He's just miserable all the time. When I come home in the evening, he's rolling around on the floor in pain. And let's say I know him in this condition, and let's say one day I come across the cure for his disease. Someone tells me that if you give this to Abdullah or anyone like him, he will be instantly cured and he will never suffer again. And let's say I take that and put it in my pocket, and I don't give it to Abdullah. Why? Why don't you give it to Abdullah? Well, number one, I'm way too busy. I have 2 jobs, going to school, I have a long commute back and forth, I got to drive up and down the 405 every day. I don't have time to give Abdullah this medicine, man. If he wants the medicine, he'll go get it himself. I don't have time. I'm really busy. Number 2, I'm not a doctor. I should not be prescribing Abdullah medicine, and I'm not knowledgeable in medicine. He should, if he wants help, he should go see a doctor. I'm not a doctor. Number 3, Abdullah's, please forgive me, but Abdullah's kind of stubborn. He doesn't really listen very well. He probably, he's kind of set in his ways. So even if I tell him this medicine is good for him and it'll cure him, he probably wouldn't even take it anyway. So why waste my time? Do any of these excuses sound familiar? And let's say I don't give this medicine to Abdullah and he dies. And let's say he dies the most painful death that you can ever imagine. I want to ask you a kind of rhetorical question. Do you think on the Day of Judgment that Allah is going to call me and Abdullah up and ask him about this incident between me and him because I've oppressed him? I have oppressed him. I've allowed him to suffer knowing that I could ease his suffering. I'm sure Allah is going to ask us about this. But the beauty about Islam is that if Abdullah was a good Muslim, bore this disease patiently and died, he dies as a shaheed, inshallah. And on the Day of Judgment, this is how beautiful Islam is. That he could very well come before and Allah ask us about this, and brother Abdullah say, you know what? Allah, I forgive him. So you forgive him. This is the beauty of our religion. And Allah will forgive me. But the disease I want to tell you about is the disease that every single non-Muslim walks around with every single day, and they don't even know it. It has no real physical symptoms. And that's the disease of shirk. The disease of being jahl, being ignorant about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah gives them life and they worship someone else. Allah feeds them and they thank someone else. He created them and fashioned them in the womb of their mother and knows them better than they know themselves. And they have no idea who He is. They don't even know who He is. If that doesn't pain your heart to see a person in this condition, then for sure the hearts have become hardened. Because when I see non-Muslims, especially when I sit in places like airports, I see this disease. I see it on them. I see them walking around with it. And there's so many of them passing me, I think to myself, there's no way I could talk to all of them. There's nothing I can do. And this disease is something that not only is not going to show up as a physical symptom, and it's going to leave them ignorant about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when the day they die, they will die the most physically painful death that anyone can ever suffer. The Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that when the angel of death comes to the disbeliever, it doesn't come kindly. He yanks the soul through the nose, and it's as if his flesh is torn from his bones. It's as if they take Brother Abdullah and turn him upside down and stuff him in a human paper shredder. This is the death that is waiting for those who do not know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you know the unfortunate thing? That while you've been sitting here listening to me, thousands of people have died. Thousands of people have lost their life not knowing Allah while I'm talking to you right now. People in this city have lost their life, and there's nothing we can do about them. They're gone. It's too late for them. We can't save them even if we want to. And that's a deplorable, deplorable, sad, sad fact that we can't save them. But there are many, 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 many who we can save. And that all that takes is us taking this light of Islam we have and showing it to the world. There's a statement in the Bible, and I finish with this. Whether Jesus alayhi salam said this or not doesn't matter, because this statement is one of the most profound statements that has been somewhat of a focus for me in my mission of da'wah. It is said that no one would bring a candle into his home and then place a bucket on top of it, because then no one would benefit from the light. No, if someone would bring a candle in their home, they would set it on the table in the middle of the room so that everyone could benefit from this light. And unfortunately, the Muslims of this generation, we are a bunch of candles with buckets on top of it. No one can see our light. No one can see the beauty of Islam in it. Believe me, if you don't see it, believe me, take it from someone who was once standing on the outside looking through the window at that light. It is one of the most beautiful things you can ever lay your eyes on. It is a treasure to be found of treasures. And everyone else can see this, and they will see this if we show it to them. If we allow Islam to be Islam. If we start becoming Muslims, meaning that the best form of da'wah that you can do to this world is very, very simple. It's not complex. It doesn't take a 10-hour workshop, even though some of the details do. But if you want to know the way, the best way to do da'wah is for Muslims to be Muslims. That's it. Study our history. Study the history of Islam. Why was the world conquered by Islam? Not through military campaigns and wars, but through Muslims being Muslims. The most populated Muslim country, Indonesia, was because of Muslims being Muslims. A few Muslims deciding to get up off their behinds and go to another country and live their life as Muslims, not shaving off their deen to be pleasing to those people, but being Muslims. And when the people asked them and inquired, what is it about you backwards Arabs that we've heard all these crazy things about? Now you come out of the desert with pristine moral and character, and you have better ethics and morals than we do. What is it that's happened to you people? And their answer was, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. That we believe in Allah and He has sent us a man named Muhammad, and we emulate his lifestyle. That's why we're like this. This is what conquered the world for Islam. This is what conquered people's hearts for Islam. Was the truth and the beauty of it, and its simplicity of its message. This is what brought me, and this is what the world needs. With all of this foolishness going on in the world, this is what it needs, the simplicity of Islam, whether they want to hear it or not. They know it in the bottom of their heart. When you show them the truth, even if they turn away from it, they know it's the right thing. They know it's the truth. And on the day of judgment, you can stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having washed your hands and saying that I did my job. And I finished just one more thing. I finished with this. If you don't believe this is important, if you don't believe this is one of the most important things you can do as a Muslim, then the last statement of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the Muslims as a whole, he gave his farewell sermon. And we know that what his farewell sermon was a summary or a synopsis of what Islam is and its general principles. And he knew this was the last thing he was going to say to the Muslims as a whole. And how did he end this sermon? Those who are here, pass this on to those that are not here. For verily it may be that the last one that hears my message may understand it than those right here among us. He gave a command to those Muslims to pass it on, and for those Muslims to pass it on, and for those Muslims to pass it on, until there was no one left to hear this message. This was a command he gave, the last command he gave to this ummah as a whole. And then what happened? He pointed his finger to the heavens and said, "O Allah, bear witness that I have indeed conveyed your message." And upon saying this, what happened? Allah revealed the surah, "This day I have perfected for you your deen and completed my favor for you and chose for you Islam as your religion." And the last statement that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave to us before this was revealed was that we must pass this message on. He gave us that duty. He took that duty that was only reserved for prophets. No one else, no other If you don't believe me, go read Surah Al-Bayna about what was commanded of the other nations. No other nation was given this opportunity and blessing to pass on this deen except us. Because there are no more prophets coming. So the job falls on our shoulders. Qurans are not going to fall out of the sky and hit people when they're walking down the street. This job has now become ours. And just like if the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had not done his mission, he would have been accountable before Allah. If we do not do our job of spreading this message of Islam, we will stand before Allah on the Day of Judgment. Don't be the person standing before Allah on the Day of Judgment and your neighbor that you've known, your co-worker that you've known 10, 15, 20 years come and find you and tell you, you knew this day was coming. You knew this day was coming and what was going to happen to me, and you did not say anything to me. And those people will complain to Allah about us. They will complain to Allah about us. Because we have the truth right amongst them and we're not giving it to them. We need to stop hiding it in our masjids, in our homes, in our hearts. And we need to give it to the people. It's beautiful, trust me. Just hand it to them. Just hand it to them. I promise you they'll take it. Because it's something that is so pure and pristine. And forgive me for probably going over my time. And if we have time, I want to leave some time for questions and answers. I will be outside to take any questions and answers. The only last thing I want to announce and let you brothers and sisters know is one of my biggest dawah projects is a DVD project that I do. And my goal is to put a DVD about Islam in the hands of every single person in the United States of America. Right now I'm working on Florida and I have other brothers working in other places because people will watch a DVD. We did studies on this and people will watch media before they'll read a book or before they'll listen to an audio CD. And alhamdulillah, through these DVDs we've gotten, I would say an average about 2 shahadas a month. Because my personal contact info is on the DVDs and people watch them and they call me and I converse with them and usually most of them accept Islam. I just had a shahada the day before yesterday from Irvine, Texas, from someone who had bought the DVD and given it, a Muslim had bought it, gave it to his friend. His friend hated it or didn't want it, so he gave it to another person, and that person gave it to a co-worker at work who watched it and accepted Islam. So this is one of my biggest projects. And the way this project works is I make 100 DVDs, and I brought 2 of them with me today. I'm going to explain what they are. The way this project works is I make 100 DVDs, and 75 of them go out to different dawah arenas. And the other 25 I make available for Muslims to purchase for 2 reasons: so that they can be, so that I can buy another 100 to make, and so that you can share in this ajr along with me. Because when you purchase a DVD that makes another DVD or you give it to a friend, then you share in this ajr with me. And everyone knows that da'wah is the biggest pyramid system because of the hadith Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that one who calls to guidance gets the same reward as the one guided without that reward being lost from him. So I made these DVDs available to the Muslims so that you can put a little effort in da'wah and make another 100 inshallah. So I brought 2 today and they're outside. One of them is called Islam in the Bible, which is basically what I just told you in a PowerPoint format, so that you could see all these verses that I saw, all these things that I read that allowed me to see the truth of Islam very clearly when I saw it, and I coincide them with the Quran so that you could see them. And there's another one the other one's called The True Gospel of Jesus Christ, where I go through the New Testament. Well, first part I think is an interview about me and my story to Islam, and there's some other Q&As on the other DVDs about nature of God and all these different things. But it's a PowerPoint presentation about the New Testament and Jesus Christ, and how you can prove to someone that Jesus Christ taught Islam from the New Testament, from their own book, that they have to agree. They either have to believe it or reject it. And if you believe it, then you have to believe what I'm saying is true about Islam. If you reject it, then this is your book, not mine. So, I try to use these 2 teaching methods, and they also can be given to non-Muslims because they're in a PowerPoint format. They're in a very educated format, and they're available outside for $10 each. So if you could, please don't make me take any of them back home, because they always hassle me about taking 200 DVDs on an airplane anyway. So please come and get them, and if you have any questions, my contact info is on there and everything. If you have any more questions for me, and my website and everything. I thank you for your time, and if anything has been of benefit, know that truly all good comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if anything that I have said is incorrect or hurtful or shameful, know that indeed that comes from my own naps and my own lack of understanding. أقول هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.